Okay, let's dive into this. This past Monday, 12:33 p.m. peninsular time, something pretty major happened in Spain.
Massive, really.
Yeah, a huge blackout. And for those of you listening from outside Spain, following Spain today, this is, well, it's crucial context. We're talking almost the entire country offline.
Almost. The islands, Canaries, Balearics, plus Ceuta and Melilla were spared, but the peninsula, pretty much dark.
An unprecedented scale, really. So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack what happened, look at the potential causes, because there's some debate there, and importantly, the immediate impact it had.
And the sources we're drawing on, they're mostly news reports right after the event, plus statements from Red Eléctrica Española, that's REE, the grid operator, right, the government, and of course, reports on the investigations that are already kicking off.
And we'll also briefly touch on something maybe seemingly unrelated, the recovery in Valencia 6 months after that devastating Dana, the floods last October.
It sounds separate, but understanding how Spain handles major infrastructure challenges, like the Dana aftermath, might give us some perspective, especially on resilience.
Exactly. So our mission here is clear.
Yeah.
Figure out what happened with this blackout, why it might have happened, and what it meant for people on the ground. Essential stuff for our Spain Today listeners.
Absolutely. It's a critical snapshot of the country's infrastructure and, frankly, its vulnerabilities. So where do we start? The moment it happened.
Yeah, the initial failure. The reports mention 15 gigawatts of power just disappearing in 5 seconds.
It's staggering. That's, 60% of the electricity supply at that exact moment vanished. They're calling it completely unprecedented.
So what explanation did REE, the grid operator, give for this? How does that much power just vanish?
Well, REE's operations director laid out their initial findings. They're saying it was 2 separate, very quick losses of generation.
2 losses.
Yeah. The first one was in the southwest. They actually said that was satisfactorily handled, basically.
Okay.
But then, just 1.5 seconds later, boom, a second loss. And this one seems to have destabilized the whole system, caused oscillations.
Oscillations, like the grid wobbling.
Kind of, yeah. A technical term for instability. And 3.5 seconds after that second loss, the whole system went down. Blackout.
Wow. So a rapid cascade failure. Did they say what might have caused those initial generation losses?
They floated an idea preliminarily that the first loss might have involved solar power generation.
Might have.
Exactly. They were very careful to say these aren't definite conclusions. It's early days in the investigation.
Okay. Now, the big question everyone asks was something like this. Cyber attack. What did REE say?
RE's director was pretty firm on that, at least as the origin. He said there was effectively no type of intrusion in the control systems that could have caused the incident. Ruled it out as the trigger.
But the government, they sounded a bit more cautious, didn't they?
That's a really important contrast, yeah. Prime Minister Sánchez came out saying they're not ruling anything out yet. He stressed the need for a full investigation into those crucial 5 seconds and, interestingly, also mentioned seeking explanations from the private energy companies involved.
So a bit of a difference there between the operator and the government's initial stance.
Definitely. And it gets more serious because the Audiencia Nacional is involved now.
Spain's high court, right? What does their involvement signify?
It signifies they're taking this extremely seriously. They've opened an investigation specifically looking into possible sabotage.
Sabotage, including cyber sabotage.
Yes, they explicitly mentioned cyber sabotage as a potential avenue. The thinking is, if this was a deliberate act aimed at disrupting essential services, it could potentially be classed as terrorism under Spanish law.
That is heavy.
It is. The judge has asked for reports within 10 days from the National Cryptologic Center, Spain's cybersecurity agency, plus REE and the police.
So the investigation is definitely moving fast and looking at all angles, even if REE initially leaned towards a technical fault. Okay, so most of the country is dark. What happened next? Getting the power back on.
Right, the recovery. That was obviously priority number 1. REE announced the system was normalized by Tuesday morning.
Pretty quick, all things considered. How'd they manage that?
They mainly used hydroelectric power and gas-fired combined cycle plants. Those can be ramped up relatively quickly to stabilize the grid.
Makes sense.
And looking forward, RE also mentioned plans to strengthen the connections with France's power grid to improve reliability, have more backup.
Sensible long-term move.
Yeah.
But the immediate effects.
Yeah.
Transportation must have been chaotic.
Oh, absolutely. Huge disruption. You had thousands of people stranded at train stations, some apparently stuck overnight.
Right.
While the metro systems in Madrid and Barcelona got running again fairly quickly, and airports were mostly okay, several major train lines still had issues well into Tuesday.
And communications, phones, internet.
Also hit hard initially, but reports suggest telecommunications were largely back to normal by Tuesday as well. Still, a major headache for a while there.
And what about schools? That must have been a huge concern for parents.
It was, and the response was really varied across the different regions, the autonomous communities.
How so?
Well, 8 regions declared a national emergency footing for this. In those places, schools were told to open, but not for normal classes.
Oh, just for
family conciliation, they called it. Basically childcare, so parents could still work, but no teaching. And in some cases, school buses weren't running either.
Okay. And other regions?
Aragon did something similar, childcare, no classes. But then you had Cantabria, Basque Country, Catalonia, Asturias, Navarra, Castile, and Leon. They didn't announce big, specific measures like that. So a real patchwork response.
Interesting. Any other knock-on effects?
Yeah, in Aragon, they actually had to extend the school enrollment deadline by a day because the IT systems went down with the power outage.
Shows how interconnected everything is.
It really does. And just as a side note, there was a teacher's strike planned in Madrid anyway, and apparently that went ahead even though classes were canceled in many schools because of the blackout.
Right, okay. And universities, were they affected too?
Yes, many were. Especially around Madrid, lots of universities canceled classes and exams on Tuesday. Non-essential stuff.
But kept some things open.
Some libraries, study areas, meeting spaces stayed open, it seems. But universities in Catalonia and parts of Andalusia started getting back to normal more quickly, while others remained disrupted.
Okay, so a widespread impact, clearly, beyond just the lights being out. Now, for our listeners, especially those following Spain today, let's connect this maybe loosely to the Dana in Valencia last October. Different cause, obviously.
A completely different cause, yes. Natural disaster versus what we're still figuring out.
Right. But looking at the Dana's aftermath, what does it tell us about infrastructure challenges in Spain? Does it offer any context here?
I think it does, indirectly. It shows how vulnerable critical infrastructure can be, whether it's weather or something else, and just how long and difficult recovery can be. It underscores the impact these large-scale disruptions have on communities.
Can you just remind us of the scale of that Valencia Dana? It was huge, wasn't it?
Immense. The regional government estimated over 300,000 people were directly affected. Think about that. Damage to over 11,000 homes, 141,000 cars destroyed or damaged, roads, bridges, just massive infrastructure damage.
And the cost estimate was enormous.
That's 18 billion euros, yeah.
And 6 months on, people are still struggling with the fallout.
Sadly, yes. It's not just about clearing mud anymore. Thousands are apparently still waiting on paperwork for their wrecked cars. And a really tough one is elevators.
Elevators.
Thousands of elevators in apartment buildings were damaged by the flooding and still aren't working. Think about elderly residents, people with mobility issues trapped on upper floors.
That's awful. What are they doing?
Well, organizations like the Cruz Roja, the Red Cross, have been helping with special stair-climbing chairs, but it's a stopgap. Getting all those elevators fixed is apparently going to take many more months. It really highlights those long-term hidden consequences.
Definitely. What about other infrastructure like transport or housing?
Still ongoing repairs there, too. Part of the Metro Valencia train line, Line 1, is still out of action. They're using replacement buses.
6 months later.
6 months later. And in the worst-hit residential areas like Lourdes Sud, people are facing huge challenges rebuilding. You hear stories of families relying on aid, waiting for homes to be demolished because they're unsafe, people forced to relocate entirely.
Just a nightmare for those involved.
Absolutely. And even seemingly smaller things like repairing communal garages damaged by floods have become huge problems because of complex insurance issues. One community was facing a massive bill they couldn't afford.
And the Dana must have hit education hard in those areas too.
Oh, significantly. Thousands of kids had to be moved to different schools, temporary locations, some lost instructional time. Rebuilding damaged schools is taking time. There's one school in Paiporta where students are still in temporary modular classrooms.
And parents weren't happy about the situation.
No, there were complaints about transportation for the relocated kids, concerns about the quality of education and temporary setups, and just a general feeling that the planning could have been better. Amnesty International even criticized the regional government's response.
So, okay, different causes, a weather disaster versus this sudden blackout. But both events really throw Spain's infrastructure vulnerabilities into sharp relief.
Exactly. They show how disruptive failures can be, whether natural or potentially otherwise, and how long the road to recovery can be. It's crucial context for anyone watching Spain.
Right. Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive for our Spain Today listeners, key takeaways on the blackout. It was incredibly sudden, incredibly widespread across the peninsula.
Unprecedented scale, really.
The cause is still very much under investigation. REE leans technical, but the government and courts are seriously considering sabotage, possibly cyber.
That investigation is definitely one to watch.
Immediate chaos followed: transport disruptions, school closures or shifts to childcare, general upheaval.
And the Dana aftermath serves as that sobering reminder of how deep and long-lasting the impact of major infrastructure failures can be.
So, for everyone listening from outside Spain, keeping track of events like this blackout is, well, it's vital for understanding the pressures and challenges the country is navigating right now. These aren't abstract issues.
No, they hit people's daily lives directly. They affect stability, the economy, everything. Understanding this gives you a much clearer picture of contemporary Spain.
Okay, so here's something to maybe leave you thinking about, especially if you follow news from Spain. We live in this world that's so interconnected, so reliant on these complex, sometimes fragile infrastructure systems.
Increasingly so.
So how do we as societies strike the right balance? How do we balance that drive for efficiency with the absolute need for resilience? How do we prepare for these massive disruptions, whether they come from technical glitches, natural disasters like the Dana, or even deliberate attacks?
It's a huge question.
It is. It goes way beyond Spain, really. It's something for all of us to think about concerning the systems we all rely on every single day.